Teacher Talk session tonight. Tonight we are going to have our 129th session, and tonight we are going to have director of studies at International House Bielsko-Biala, Christopher Walker. When he comes, we are going to start our live session with him, and we are going to talk lots of different topics with him, and it's going to be a very fruitful session with Christopher. So I'm looking forward to hearing from him. So let me invite him to the session, then we can start. For him to join. Hello. I sent the invitation, so you just need to accept it, Christopher, to join. I have accepted. Just a moment. I don't understand why is this happening. Hello.
Ah,
There we
yes,
go.
there you go.
Instagram has let me in.
Huh. I don't understand why it's happening, but it's great to see you, Christopher. Anyways,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
welcome to Teacher Talks, Christopher. And it's really great to see you here in Teacher Talks 129 session. And I would
I
like
know,
to
that's a
say,
lot. My goodness.
yeah, yeah, this is going to be a 129 session. And I would like to say thank you very much for accepting my invitation to this session.
My
And we are really happy to see you.
pleasure. Thank you. My pleasure.
And if you are ready, we can start. All
Hmm.
right then. So I know about you, Christopher, but can you tell us about yourself, please, and a bit about your experiences too?
Absolutely. Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Christopher Walker. I've been a teacher on and off since about 2003, but I did my CELTA in 2006, and I think that's really where I would start saying that I've been a teacher since. The little 2003 sort of time, that was when I was in Japan, and I hadn't done the CELTA, so I didn't really know what I was doing, and I was pretty rubbish at my job, to be honest. So I'm living proof of the importance not only of second chances, but also of initial teacher training. Most of my career has taken place here in Bielsko-Biała. After my CELTA, I did a year teaching in Krakow at the International House there, but then I moved down this way, basically to kind of get a better experience of real Polish life. Krakow is a beautiful city, but you can go whole days just walking the streets only hearing English. So I wanted to go to a place where English was more of an alien commodity. Well, I found it. Bielsko-Biała is the place to be. It's a nice little city nestled in the mountains, the Beskidi Mountains here
Uh-huh.
in Poland. I can look out the window and I can see the mountains in the distance. It's pretty cool,
Cool.
actually. So yeah, I've been teaching for a good number of years now. I did my master's degree a couple of years ago, and starting basically last week, I became the director of studies of the school I teach at here.
Wonderful. Congratulations
Thank
about
you.
it. And let's move to another question. Thank you very much, Christopher. So what was or were your turning point or points in your own education?
Do you mean in my education leading up to teaching or as a teacher? Because I've kind of got a couple of different things.
It's up to you. You can talk about both, not a problem.
Okay. I suppose the one that will be of most interest to your listeners will be the one that made me realize that I wanted to be a real career professional teacher. Because you get a lot of teachers like myself who come into EFL. We teach for a couple of years on the back of basically just being native speakers. The lessons are okay, but we get by both mostly on rapport with the students. You know, the students come in, they say, "Oh, I love your lessons." It's like, do you love the lessons or do you just like the fact that I'm English? So the turning point came for me with the second director of studies I worked with, a wonderful woman called Kasia Jakiraszek. And she kind of pushed me to do more career development within the job. She got me involved in the school's language awareness course, which was something that was written by Alex Tilbury, who people in the International House might know of. And basically it was like a 12 or 13 week program where we went through the elements of English grammar in a way that I'd never really considered before. A lot of it was built on the work of Michael Lewis, who famously wrote a book called The English Verb. And it's kind of stripped away a lot of the complexity of grammar and showed English grammar to be what it is, which is, as far as I'm concerned now, quite simple. It's our fault as teachers for making it so complicated. So that was really a turning point. And I don't think I looked back. Once I'd done that additional bit of development, I started looking, what can I do next? So I did some courses with International House. Then eventually I did my master's with the University of Leicester. So I have an MA in Applied Linguistics and TESOL.
Wow.
I'm still toying with the idea of doing the Delta. The problem with the Delta is that it's expensive.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's really expensive. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for sharing them. And Christopher, I know that you have been teaching for a long time as a teacher, and probably you have tried different methodologies, strategies, and techniques in your lessons. And so probably you have a kind of a philosophy of teaching. So what is it? What is your philosophy of teaching?
I think that my philosophy, if you had to pin it down to a single word, is eclectic. I think that if you become too reliant on one single approach, your lessons might soon start to become a bit stale. And if they become stale, then you start to lose interest a little bit yourself. And that's the very worst thing that can happen to a teacher, is that if they lose interest in their lessons, how are you expecting your students to be interested in them? You don't care about them, they're not going to care. But part of this kind of eclectic attitude is the realization, for one thing, that I see my students in groups twice a week. Yeah, maybe Monday and Wednesday, maybe Tuesday and Thursday. So if I don't finish everything in the first lesson of the week, it's not a disaster. I can come back to it in the next lesson. Because, you know, when you do your teacher training, you do the CELTA, you do the Delta, everything's in that kind of, you know, here's the start of the lesson, here's the end of the lesson. You have to do all of the things that you plan to do in that time.
Sure.
Which is a good thing to try to do, but it's also a little bit artificial. If you need longer, spend more time on it and actually kind of get into the meat of things. Having that kind of flexibility of approach has a lot of benefits. The first of those being that, you know, when I started off as a teacher, and I had my lesson plan, which was scripted out in a lot of detail, if one of the students wanted to ask me something about what we were looking at, or wanted to tell me or the class something that sounded really interesting, I would often say, okay, but maybe later. Now, I'm very happy to kind of open the floor to other people and for them to tell me other things. I remember a case a couple of years ago. We were looking at how you can use grammatical distance to be polite. You know, instead of saying, I want a coffee, you could say, I would like a coffee. So we looked at that a little bit, and that led into a discussion, just off the cuff discussion, about the idea of face and how important face is basically in all languages, but how it's expressed. Now, that wasn't part of my initial plan, but it seemed interesting. Started talking about it with the students, and we really got into some very interesting territory. So I think that being open is a very important part of any methodology.
I see. I got it. Thank you very much. Thank you. And as a teacher, but would you like to get anything else, or can I move to
No,
another
no, I
question?
think we go
All right,
on. Yeah.
wonderful. And so, as a teacher or educator or trainer, probably in your career you have a success stories, just like other teachers. And if it is okay, can you tell us one or maybe two success stories of yours? Something inspirational, if you have it.
Well, this is the interesting thing about being a teacher, isn't it? Because your
Sure.
success stories are never truly your own. You can never be more than half of the equation. As we always say, you can't learn it for them. So it all becomes a matter of helping your students to achieve the potential that they had anyway. So I suppose the closest thing that comes to a real success story for me would be a student who I first encountered when I came to the school back in 2008 when I came to Bielsko. One of the teachers called in sick. The school asked me, "Do you think you could teach this kid?" And he was like 7 years old. I said, "Sure, why not?" Didn't have any preparation, went into the class, discovered that there was this 7-year-old who was already pretty good with his English. Like he already had a good command of certain things and he was very chatty, so it made it very easy to teach him, even though it was like a lesson with no notice and no
Yeah.
preparation time. He enjoyed the lesson, and after that, the following year, he became my student. And we stayed together, me and this kid, all through the years, all through, going through his schooling, getting close to the school maturity exam, the Matura here in Poland, even preparing eventually for his applications to an English university. And it was such a proud day for me when he came in and he said that he'd gotten in to UCL,
Uh-huh.
one of the big universities in London, to do chemistry, which was
Wow.
it was amazing. The fact that he managed to get in to a British university of such a high standing on the back of the
Cool.
lessons he'd had with me. Now, obviously, he's the one who's done all the work. He's worked massively hard on all of
Wonderful.
this, and I've just been there to help along the way. But I like to think that he got to where he wanted to be, partly thanks to the work we did together. So I'd call that a success story.
Yeah, it's a kind of success story. It's really great.
Yeah.
So imagine. Yeah, and then the feeling I think is amazing for him or for you, all of you. Excellent.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And as an educator or trainer, Christopher, probably the teachers or the new teachers, they come and they ask your help, they ask your advice, they ask your support. And how do you do that? How do you support teachers when they need your advice?
Um, this is something I've thought long and hard about, and there was a particular thing that I came across, and it was just like a one-line thing that really kind of changed my approach with everything teacher training related. And it's this idea that you might have heard of called the curse of knowledge.
Yeah,
Is that something you've heard of?
yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So the idea, for those who don't know, the curse of knowledge is that once you possess knowledge of something, it's almost impossible to imagine being without that knowledge. Yeah. And that makes that knowledge really difficult to transfer because you just can't imagine not having it. So it would be a little bit like somebody who grew up in Japan not
Uh-huh.
knowing how to use chopsticks, or somebody in the UK not knowing how to use a knife and fork. You just can't imagine it. Or even with adults, and I've got a couple of kids myself, and I'm at that stage with them now, tying shoelaces. It's such a difficult thing to imagine not knowing that helping somebody learn becomes really difficult. And that's the same, I would say, for people like me who have been at the same school for a number of years and every year welcome new teachers. And there's a teacher who's like, "Oh, how do I fill in the register?" And you're like, "Oh, well, you click here, 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 do the drop down list, select that, and just save it." And then
I
they
see.
look at you as if you've just spoken colloquial Arabic. you have to imagine not knowing even the most elementary things. And then once you've realized that, once you kind of put yourself in the shoes of the person speaking to you,
Sure.
you then have to approach the situation sincerely and in a way that can't be confused for patronizing.
Yeah, I see. It's really sometimes I'm sure that it's really difficult to give an advice to others, or you think a lot on it, and sometimes you probably you think that, oh, what I'm gonna do and how I'm gonna teach it, how what if I say something wrong to them, what's gonna happen, or
Yeah,
maybe divert them in the wrong way, what's gonna happen? Something like
exactly. Yeah, and the other part of it, I suppose, leading on from what you've just said, is that like we can't learn the language for our students, we can't teach the lesson for our fellow teachers. So when a teacher comes to you for advice and says, "Oh, what do you think I should do here?" you can make suggestions, but you've got to be careful that you don't go too far and kind of become dogmatic and say, "Well, you have to do it this way."
I see.
Because they'll go off and do it their own way anyway. So, subtly suggest, carefully suggest, but don't be surprised if only 20% of your suggestion actually takes root.
I see. I got it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Christopher. And what I'm gonna ask you, something related the place where you work now, International House, and it's a really big company. It's a really big language kind of a school, I think, if I'm not wrong.
Hmm.
And so, but it's been for a long time. It's there in the International House. It takes part in many countries, not only the where you are now. Also, we have also in
Yes.
Turkey. So, but what I'm gonna ask about it, what makes different International House English language education than others?
Okay, well, a little bit of background. So, International House is an organization that's now existed for, I think, 70 years. I think it's the 70th
Wow.
anniversary of the creation of the company now. So it was devised 70 years ago. I think it was Britain. Well, I forget the name. It was Haycraft, I think it was, that came up with the idea. And I think the first school was opened in Cordoba in Spain. They wanted to use the communicative method, get students talking. Eventually, they found partner schools who then took on the franchise. And that's what International House is. It's
Ah,
a franchise system. One of the things that it gives as an advantage over other schools is that they actually care about the quality of every International House school. So we
I
have
see.
regular inspections. International House send an inspector every couple of years to make sure that the quality is to the standard that International House expect, and they expect a high standard, I can tell you, because these inspections really go deep. Just ask anyone. I think Torun had one recently, the International House in Torun. I think they had their inspection, which they passed successfully. Um,
Wonderful.
but yeah, it's a demanding thing, and it's great that they have that because there are so many schools out there that do a good job. I'm sure there are lots of schools that do a great job. They say, we're going to teach you well, and then with languages, the proof is in the pudding, I suppose, isn't it? If you leave the school speaking the language better than you did going in, then your money's been well spent. But I also imagine, because I've spoken to a lot of teachers, that there are going to be schools out there who don't take care of their students quite as well, or they don't take care of their teachers and the teachers' development quite so well. And one of the
Exactly.
advantages, yeah, I mean, with International House, you're a little bit more likely to get the quality that you really want. As a teacher, there are advantages to working at International House. Our school, for example, offers a fantastic professional development system. So we have regular teach training sessions, things like that. Up in the north of the country, where Glenn Standish works at IH Torrent, they have an annual conference that is a really big thing. I mean, I'm not saying it quite competes with IATEFL Poland, but it must be up there, I would say, certainly in terms of the fun that you can have.
By the way, I have done myself an international house in Turkey, in Izmir, Turkey. Yeah,
Nice.
I have done it there. It was really fantastic. And one of my teacher was Amanda Gamble. Maybe you know her.
Uh-huh. The name rings a bell. Yeah.
Yeah, she's in, I think, in kind of not Syria, but a kind of in Arabic countries. She's right now. but she was excellent teacher.
Hmm.
And really, I'm really happy that I had the chance to, that the training from her at International House. That was really nice.
Yeah.
Thanks. I am also one of your teachers, sorry, students, as I did. Okay, thank you very much about it. So let's move to another questions. Probably you have done lots of training sessions or I don't know presentations, and when you think about them, what was or were the most interesting situation or situations that you faced in this training?
Well, this one's an easy one to answer. Now, earlier in our talk, I mentioned the language awareness course that I did with my school and how we looked at the fundamentals of grammar.
I see.
Now, I did a lot more research into things after that. And over the last 24 months or so, I really kind of nailed down a lot of the ideas that I hold on to now. I even wrote a book on it called English is a Simple Language, which is available through Amazon for those who can actually get on Amazon,
Oh,
depending on where
wonderful.
you are. And I gave a presentation at International House Torrens Teacher Training Day in front of a wide cast of characters, some big names, including, believe it or not, Alex Tilbury. Now, Alex Tilbury, I
Wow.
mentioned earlier, he was the guy who wrote the language awareness course. So it's a bit like imagining if you were an up-and-coming football coach and you're doing a practice session and suddenly Pep Guardiola turns up and you go, oh my God, it's Pep Guardiola. It felt just like that. I was starstruck. I think the session went really well because people were buzzing, the room was buzzing, people were talking constantly. A lot of people came up to me afterwards with lots of questions. So I think that it went well. The most important thing for me was to know how Alex Tilbury felt about it, and he said it was good.
That was the point, actually,
Yeah.
the main point that you were wondering about it. That's really nice one. It's really
Exactly.
interesting. Great. By the way, you passed. You passed.
Yes, exactly.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. And do you have any other interesting moments want to add, or I can move another question?
Oh, I could talk all day like this, so you best go on to the next question before I
Okay,
go off on.
so as you
Yeah.
know that it's a technology age now, it's really the growing speedily, and sometimes we can't reach it, and sometimes we know that we go to sleep and then we wake up and a lot of things happen around the world,
Hmm.
so it's really hard to follow them. But how do you do that? How do you stay updated with the latest developments and the trends in education?
This is a really good question, actually. One of the things that was an eye-opener for me on my master's course was that there's so much research out there. There's so much research being done, and there are so many journals out there catering to EFL. I mean, on the kind of less serious side, let's call it, we have the IH journal, for which I'm actually the editor. So if anyone's listening and you want to get published, if you've got a good article idea, send it to me. There's Modern English Teacher. There is Humanizing Language Teaching. Some fantastic outlets there. But on the academic side, you've got like the TEFL Journal, you've got TESOL Quarterly, you've got all of these things where, it's peer reviewed and everything like that. And I just had no idea these things existed until I started doing my master's. And I think it's one of the great pities really is that so few teachers actually read these academic journals, partly because it's so difficult to get access. I mean, when I was doing the master's degree, I had, I think it was called the Open Athens account, so that you could get access to all the journals you could think of. But if you go in as a private sort of citizen and you look at these pages and they're like, oh, you'd like to read this PDF? For 24 hours, that's $60, please. And you think, well, that's crazy. So there's so much that's behind a paywall that you can't hope to keep up with. And I find it quite disheartening, really, because there are going to be people out there who really want to learn more about the latest research trends in EFL. They're going to want to know, for example, if I'm playing a video in my class and I want subtitles, is it better for me to have subtitles in English or in L1? They're going to want to know that sort of thing. And there has been research into it. The research suggests that probably on balance, L1 subtitles might be better than English, but you can read the research and decide for yourself. But that's only if you know that the research has been done, and that's only if you then find it. So yeah, I mean, your question of how do you keep up with it, I don't have an answer, but all I can say is that there's a hell of a lot more stuff out there for people to read than they probably realize.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree with you. There are lots of the things that we can reach and we can define very useful for ourselves. But the thing is that, and how do we do that, and when do we do that, and do we spend enough time for them? Maybe that's also another point.
Yeah. No, it's a fantastic point that you make there, actually. A lot of teachers probably have a desire to research their field a lot more, but when you come down to it, if you've got a lot of hours in the classroom and you've got a choice between either accepting another paid hour or spending an hour doing research and reading about things, a lot of people, especially right now with the cost of living crisis everywhere,
Yeah,
they're more likely to choose that paid hour. I know I would, but that's, I do a lot of reading in my part-time, in my free time. At the moment, I'm reading. Can I show everyone?
of
Because
course,
this is actually quite an
sure.
interesting book. It's not mine. It's not mine. This is Activities for Mediation, which is a new release in the
It's a really
Ideas in
nice
Action
one.
series. It's brilliant. I know a couple of these guys. I know Ethan Manser. I don't know
Yeah,
if I've met Ricardo actually, but Ethan I know. I'm reading that. I didn't even know what mediation was. I'd seen it in the CFER descriptors before, saying that at this level you should be able to do this kind of mediation. I always looked at it and thought, oh, well, I don't know what that is, but it's good that it's there. And now I've got a book all about it. So this is my nighttime reading. I have like I get myself a nice non-alcoholic beverage, sit down for half an hour and go through another couple of activities and, try and figure out that's what you see the little post-it note in the top there.
yeah,
That's what I'm going to
I
try
see.
in one of my next lessons.
It's a wonderful. Really keep up with that one. It's a really nice one. By the way, Ethan also is a really successful one as an educator, trainer,
Yeah,
and he
yeah.
was also one of my guests. I think.
He was, yeah, I remember seeing the
Yeah,
picture.
he was. Yeah. Okay. So let's move to another question. And thank you, Christopher, for this one. In the EFL world, and right now there are, the many. Sometimes we face difficulties and challenges. So,
Mm.
what do you think, Christopher, are the biggest, the challenges or let's say opportunities in EFL right now? What is your idea about it?
Well, we had the pandemic quite recently. And when the pandemic struck and we entered lockdown in a lot of countries, people suddenly discovered that they could use their computers to teach lessons. And I know a lot of people who just didn't look back. They didn't go back to a physical classroom after that. They just stuck with online teaching. More credit to them, because if you find a way that works for you, that gives you that life-work balance, you should explore it and go for it.
Sure.
I've been able to teach people from all over the place thanks to platforms like Zoom and social media for sourcing students. Put an ad out there or just a post and say, hey, would anyone like an English lesson? And then you go from there. I think that's a great opportunity. It used to be that you had to move to a different place if you wanted students that fit your kind of approach as a teacher. But now, with online teaching, you can really bring the students to you. I think that there are so many things that we couldn't easily do that we can do now. But there are also things that more and more people have an appetite for. I think that there are so many ways now to learn basic English that it's quite rare to get students who have no English at all, that are starting from the absolute basics. So that means that if you're kind of targeting your approach towards B2 and upwards, then these are students who need to learn a little bit more autonomy.
I see.
So if that's the case, then you want to get into coaching a little bit more than necessarily just teaching. And it's a distinct field. One of my friends, Verdi, wrote a very nice article kind of highlighting these sort of things in terms of what the differences are between regular teaching and coaching, language coaching.
I see.
And there's Nina English in the Czech Republic. She knows a lot of this sort of thing as well. So there are people out there now who are becoming experts and are becoming well known in fields that we've basically created ourselves. And if you get there and you really make it what you're about, if you bring your passion to it, then you can make a name for yourself. I mean, look at yourself. You're a great example of that. You know, I got a message from you. I already knew who you were, even though I'd never spoken to you, never met you. I was like, oh, this guy's writing to me. Just lovely little me. My goodness. I couldn't believe it. So as soon as you said, hey, would you like to do one of these talks? I was like, yeah. Do I have to pay or something? Or can I just... I couldn't believe that I would be so lucky. So, you
Wonderful
know,
to hear.
there are all these opportunities that just didn't exist before. I mean, look at this. We're on Instagram. There are, at the moment, 11 people watching this. This is fantastic. Talk about opportunities.
Yeah, exactly. It's a one great opportunities for most of the people, so to follow it. Exactly. Okay, thank you, Christopher, for giving these ideas to us. Let's move to another. Actually, I'm really wondering what I'm gonna say about my next question, which is related with the 21st century skills, which is really important, in the classrooms. Like, but my question is, why do we have to teach 21st century skills in the classroom? And I could think about your, the experiences about it, how successful we are about it.
Well, I suppose it really depends how you define these 21st century skills as opposed to the skills of the 20th century. Because I think a lot of them are just rebranded skills, aren't they? You
Yeah,
know, being good to other people is a skill that's always existed. Empathy and open communication, these are skills, but a lot of these skills have been forgotten in the last 5 or 10 years, partly, I suppose, as a result of the pandemic and the lockdown and the lack of socialization for students at
exactly.
school, but also since the advent of the smartphone. You know, it took a while, but once the smartphone really grabbed hold of people's attention, it changed the way that people operated. And then they didn't learn a lot of skills that they now need. And we need to be there to kind of remind people of them. So I think that calling them 21st century skills is a little bit of window dressing personally, but I don't mind that. Sometimes a bit of a rebrand can help a lot. But we should just acknowledge that actually a lot of what we're trying to do as teachers is to help people become a more complete version of themselves.
I see. hmm I got the point about it. So that's why we 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 are using that way. I see.
I would
Okay.
say so.
All right,
Yeah.
I got it. Thank you very much. Christopher, let's move to another question about it. The school, the first of the school weeks in most of the countries, the school is just, they started, and maybe there are lots of new teachers or even experienced teachers. They need some advice about the first week of the schools. Like, what do you suggest for them? What do you about the first week of the school?
Successful teaching can't happen if you don't know who your students are. And when I say if you don't know who your students are, I don't just mean learning their names, but learning how they approach material, what their existing set of understanding and knowledge is.
Uh-huh.
The more that you know about your students, the better you will be able to deliver content. And this works at a philosophical level. If you're trying to teach somebody, I was talking to my wife about this actually quite recently. I was talking to her about the offside rule in football. My wife knows a bit about football, but not much. Like if I said that I used to play left wing, she can guess where it is roughly, but she doesn't know what left wing is. That's fine. So there's no point for me to start just talking about the offside rule, yeah, because she hasn't got anything to anchor that information onto. So if you start trying to teach something to your students, for example, let's say I start talking about the present perfect, and I say, okay, with the present perfect verb form, we use have as the operator. Now, if I don't know my students, how do I know if they're familiar with the word operator, if they're familiar with the idea of present perfect? I'm assuming a lot there.
Yeah.
But if I spend those first days and weeks with my students really getting to know what they understand, what their existing knowledge set is, then later I can say, okay, in this lesson we're going to look at one of the different verb forms. But before we do that, I think it would be a good idea for us to look at some of the terminology. We don't need to learn these words, but they're useful because they just speed things up a little bit.
Yes.
And then we can think about, what an operator is and what we mean when we talk about perfect verb form and things like that. So that early work of kind of getting to know the students, as well as helping to establish rapport and getting them to see you as a human instead of just as a teacher, I think that can really pay dividends. So all the activities you do, or the activities I do in the first couple of weeks, they're all they're open to personalization without actually being personalized, but they give the students an opportunity to show who they are, to show their likes and dislikes, how well they work with other people, and what they already know.
I see. Yeah, you're right. Exactly. I totally agree with you, Christopher. Thank you. And let's move to another and very useful advices, by the way. And so let's move to another question, which is related with the AI. So it's really popular nowadays. Actually, we have AI for a long time, but nowadays it's getting really popular in many parts of the the life. So how do you think? My question is, how do you think AI will change the EFL world in the near future? What is your idea?
I know that a lot of people are very worried about AI coming in and taking our jobs. I don't think that's really going to happen, because the way that this sort of AI works, like ChatGPT is basically an average machine. It takes everything that's already been done and it gives you an average result from it. But it draws on existing information. And we can already see that the law of diminishing returns is taking effect, because a lot of these AI engines are struggling to produce anything good because so many people use them to create so much content that's then being fed back into the AI that it's making the average of the average. So I don't think we need to worry quite as much. But there are opportunities. So, for example, let's say that you're teaching, I don't know, B2 first, one of the Cambridge exams.
Yes.
And you're teaching your students about the band descriptors, so the way that the writing is assessed. Now, for me, one of the best ways to do that is to look at the different descriptors. Yeah, so you've got content, communicative achievement, organization, and language. Now, you want to kind of get your students to be aware of those four. So one of the best things you can do is to take one exam rubric, like the instructions, and write maybe 5 versions of it, where 3 of the descriptors are the same and one of them is different. So imagine that your rubric is, I don't know, a letter to a friend who's coming to visit you, and you have to talk about this, this, and this. Now, in the past, I'd do this by hand, but it was quite taxing, because I'd try to make sure that I hit all the content points, that the communicative achievement was always about the same level, that the organization was the same level, but then I'd try to get like a band 1, a band 2, a band 3, a band 4, and a band 5 for language. Then I'd give the papers that resulted to my students and say, can you put them in order from the best to the worst, or the other way around? Yeah. And they would do that, and it really worked very well. But my goodness, it took me a long time to write all these papers and trying to get it right. So you can kind of train ChatGPT to do it for you. You can give it the rubric and say, give me a piece of writing that has level, like a band 5 for language, and then do the same, but give me a band 1 for language. So there are ways. If you really get into it, it takes a little bit of tweaking, but if you get into it, then it can really save a lot of time with what you're doing. And what I see in the future is that for lower level students like A1 and A2, you'll get the same sort of things with ChatGPT, but spoken. So they will be able to do a lot of their training. And for lower level students, training is all about repetition. But we as people, we find that repetition boring. We don't want to do it. I mean, this is basically what the Callan method is built on, is that idea of repetition. Duolingo is also built on repetition to an extent. And lower level students need it because you need to take something that you have to understand explicitly and transfer it into a kind of muscle memory in your head so that it becomes more like implicit knowledge and you can actually make use of it. I mean, if you're sitting there thinking, well, what's the third form of eat? Then you've already missed the opportunity to speak. But that would only happen if you're at A1 or A2
I
level. When you're at
see.
C1 level, you don't need to stop and think, wait, what's the third form of the eat? You've already finished your sentence. So getting the AI to do that for you, to do that repetitive drilling with low-level students, frees you up then to teach higher-level students skills that are more interesting and with more creativity that the AI simply cannot match because AI is not very creative.
I got it. It's a really good point you mentioned. Thank you. Thank you, Christopher, about the AI. And let's move to another question. And what I'm gonna say, in our lives or in our the during our the lives that sometimes there are times actually and we say, oh, I wish I could have that power, so I could do that, or I wish I could have that power there, so or at that time I could do that, but I can't now. Anyway, so when you think about it into the classrooms, if you could have one superpower to use in the classroom, what would it be and how would it help you?
It's not going to be like a big superpower. It's not going to be like being able to see through walls or being able to pick up a car or anything like that. I'm going to keep it within the scope of what I'd love to be able to do as a teacher. But okay, let's think about language at a philosophical level. Yeah.
Sure.
At a philosophical level, the idea that you want to communicate is always perfectly formed in your mind. Yeah.
Yes.
Pretty much. I mean, if you know what you want to say, if you know the ideas of what you want to say, then it's here. The difficulty with a foreign language, especially, is that getting from here to here, you have so many little obstructions that what comes out just here might bear nothing in relation to this. So, as a superpower, as a teacher, I would love to know what the students were actually trying to say when they made the attempt, because then I could be super efficient at error correction and helping them to realize what they wanted to say.
Wow.
Now, I already have something approaching that superpower because I've been trying to learn Polish. And the
Oh,
more I learn about Polish, and it's a difficult language, I can tell you, but the more I learn about Polish, the more I understand about why my students are making the mistakes they're making. Because they're thinking in Polish and translating. So, for example, my children might come home and say, my teacher shouted on me. I'll go, no, your teacher shouted at you. And I'm sorry
that
that that happened. It's not very good. But the preposition we want is at. Now, my children are crying when they're saying this. They don't really want the grammar lesson, but still, an opportunity is an opportunity. But in Polish, because they're bilingual, but their Polish is stronger, in Polish, it would be "chciał na mnie," like on me, basically. So the preposition in Polish is different.
different.
And so, of course, it makes sense that they've made the mistake. But when they're trying to reach for something that they just don't have the language for, I can't help them. The idea is there, and I can see the frustration, but they can't get it through. And I'd love as that superpower to be able to see what that idea is. I don't want to see every idea they have because I should imagine some of them are fairly embarrassing either for the student or for me or for both. Um,
I got it.
but yeah,
Thank-
being able to help that way, yeah, that would be a pretty decent superpower.
It's a cool one. Thank you. Thank you very much, Christopher. Let's move to another question. By the way, I hope you are not boring. It's so far so good. How's it going? Good?
Yes, I think it's good. I hope everyone
Good.
listening is enjoying
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, probably they have. Definitely they have. There are also some comments. I don't know if you can read them while you are
I've seen
talking.
a couple coming through. Yeah, if anyone had any questions themselves, I'd be happy to field them.
Yeah, if you have any questions to Christopher, please write them down in the question part, so I can divert them to him, so he can give an answer to you. So let's move to just a couple questions left, by the way, only two. So let's move to them. So think that we finish the interview and you step outside the office and find the lottery tickets on the ground. So winning $10 million, what would you do?
The way that the world is right now, I guess I'd pay my energy bill.
I see.
Yeah, it's a nice dream, isn't it? This idea of discovering a lot of money. I'm reasonably motivated by money. Yeah, I'm not enormously motivated by money because, frankly, there's not a lot more in life that I can't do that I'm not doing right now anyway. You know, my hobbies are all very reasonable hobbies, like walking and reading and things like that. But even if I suddenly became very wealthy, I wouldn't give up work because work kind of grounds me, it centers me. And I love the fact that I go into work with an appetite for what I'm doing. You know, I'm very privileged. I'm one of the lucky few who goes to work every day and is like, oh, I'm going to work and it's fine. I'm not upset about it. I'm not doing it just because I need the money. I do it because I actually do like it.
Sure.
So I don't think it would change my life enormously. I'd probably save it so that when my girls are older, they could buy a house each. But I'm not sure if, with inflation, if that 10 million will get them much.
I see. I got it. Thank you very much. Okay, so here is the last question. Are you ready for it? For the last one?
Absolutely. Let's
Okay.
go for it.
So, what is your motto? Really difficult.
I had an idea for this. Yeah, because you sent me the questions before, and I thought, oh, I do have a clever idea. And then, like all the best ideas, it kind of disappeared. I suppose the closest thing to a motto as an English teacher, it is the one that I used as the title of the book that I mentioned earlier. My motto is English is a simple language. Now, the reason I called that book English is a Simple Language is that it's actually a reference to a famous quote by the Liverpool football manager Bill Shankly. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He was a big thing in the 70s and 80s, and he said that he said football is a simple game made complicated by those who should know better. That's one possible quote. People are a little bit woolly on the details. And I feel that's the same with the English language. And it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Like at my school, when you come and you take a placement test, we place you in one of 10 levels because there are pretty much 10 levels for most schools. There are going to be like 6 to 10 different course books. Yeah?
I
Because
see.
English is such a big thing, people see the levels and they think there needs to be a book for every level. But if there is a book for every level, there needs to be grammar for every level. Which means that at one level you do a lesson on present simple for daily activities or hobbies or something, and then a few levels later you suddenly find present simple for timetable future actions, and all the students go, what? Present simple for the future? What? But then they don't realize that if they translated the sentence the train leaves at 10, if they translate that into their own language, they use a present form as well. So it's not some
Exactly.
sort of big mystery. So we've made it into something so complicated when actually English is a simple language.
Exactly. It's very nice motto, Christopher. Thank you. English is a simple language. Really good. Thank you. Okay, that's all my questions, by the way, Christopher. And before ending our live sessions, would you like to add anything else?
Just to say thank you to the people who have been watching. It's very nice to have people to listen to, but also I hope that based on what they've heard, they'll have new ideas that they're going to share with the world. They'll go out and try something different and then write about it or make a video or something so that we generate new ideas and spread them further. And of course, I have to thank our wonderful host today. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And just before ending it, you mentioned your book name. Is it possible to mention it again because Azra asked about it?
Yes, yeah, it's called English is a Simple Language. Just like the motto. And it's
English is a
available
simple.
in Amazon and there's a Kindle book as well.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And I would like to say thank you very much one more time, Christopher, for spending your I mean, like you share your ideas and share your suggestions with us, and especially you spend your time, which is really important and very precious for us here.
Thank
And
you.
and also, what I want to say is Christopher Walker was with us. It was really amazing. So we had a fruitful session with him, and we are going to be here next week on the same day at the same time, as you know that every Monday at 9 p.m. and in Turkey's time, as you know it. And until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of yourself, Christopher. And I hope we will see each other soon somewhere around the world, because you know that the world is a small place to see each other suddenly.
These days, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And until the next day, take care of yourselves. And bye bye, everybody. And bye bye, Christopher. And peace.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.